Hi guys, and welcome back to our last video about pawn structures, and today we're going to go over the Carlsbad pawn structure. And this pawn structure is basically defined by this pawn chain here and this pawn chain here by white. And like I always say, pawn structures give you the idea where you should play and how you should play. And you can see here that the white pawn chain is looking at the queen side, and the black pawn chain is looking at the king side. So this means that white is going to play on the queen side and black is going to play on the king side. Now, very important for understanding this structure is the following. Let's just split the board, and this is the queen side and this is the king side, and you can see that on the queen side black has 4 pawns versus white's 3 pawns, which means black has a majority against a minority. And on the king side it's the exact opposite. White has 4 pawns and black has 3 pawns. So here white has a majority and black has a minority. And the queen side majority is considered to be better, because if you manage to create a pass pawn here, then the king is going to be pretty far away from catching this pawn, and that's why this position was considered better for black for a really long time. But then they discovered the idea of the minority attack. And the minority attack is basically to push your minority here and create the weaknesses on this majority. And by doing this you also get some good squares for your pieces, as I will show right now. Okay, so this should go something like b4. If black plays something stupid, let's say h6, you play b5. And now basically black has 3 options. He can take and you recapture the pawn with, I don't know, a rook or a knight. And then you can see black is left with an isolated pawn, which he probably doesn't want because it's kind of a weakness, right? And then the second option for black here is to just advance the pawn to c5, but then it's the same thing again. You just take and he has an isolated pawn here. So these 2 options aren't very sound for black, maybe sometimes but usually not. So the last option is to just leave it like this. For example, he plays something stupid, and then you can see the idea of this minority attack. You take the c6 pawn, and now you can see that this is a backwards pawn, because it's hardly going to advance here because this pawn is protecting it, and you have your rook on the c1 square, also putting pressure on this pawn. And the plan here is to just regroup your forces here and try to attack this pawn really hard. And also this c5 square is a very good square for your pieces. For example, it's a good outpost for your knight. It can jump from a4 to c5. From where it's really active, as you can imagine. And when you're ready, you just move this knight out of the way and attack this pawn really hard. And this c6 pawn is so weak because it has no protection from other pawns. The b7 pawn was here before, but we just exchanged it, so this pawn is really a weakness here. So this is the whole idea of the minority attack basically, and this is the most common plan in the Carlsbad structure here for white. And you can a lot of times support this minority attack idea with playing the move a4, just giving more protection to this b5 square. And you play this normally when player with the black pieces plays a6 to stop you from doing the minority attack, but then you can still do it and just do damage to his structure. So this is the first and most common seen plan, and the other plan for white here is to play f3 and e4. And you want to play this to get more space, also the control in the center, as you're going to see. For example, if you play f3, he plays something, and then you can see you have really good control over the center. So that's also one idea for white here. Now another idea for white here in this structure is to play knight to a4 and knight to c5, because this is a really good square for a knight, as you can see. And if he tries to kick you away with playing b6, then you can just play your knight back, and since you have a rook on the c1, this pawn is going to become pretty weak and you can attack it. So this is another really cool idea to use here with white. As we said, black's pawn chain is looking here on the king side, so he's going to focus his play on the king side. So the first plan is to do a minority attack. Let's say white does something, and this is with f5 and then f4, and it's the same thing like we saw at the other side of the board. Now he basically wants to take the pawn, create a backwards pawn, double his rooks here, probably put a knight here, and just have a pretty good position, right? Now the second plan for black here is actually to attack the white's king. And he can do this with f5 or even without f5, because you can imagine his pieces, his bishop on d6 looking here, his other bishop here, his knight on f6 can join the attack, his queen here can also join the attack, and also his rook. He has really a lot of pieces to attack, so this is a really common plan here used by black. Today we're going to look at a game where white used this idea of the minority attack, and he did it successfully and won the game. Alright, so the Carlsbad pawn structure can arise from different openings. Usually it comes out of the Queen's Gambit, but we can also see it from an opening such as c4, the English opening, like we're going to see in this example. Okay, so white played c4, black played e6, and these here are just basic opening moves, and we're going to transpose into the Queen's Gambit actually here, and white decides to capture the pawn. Now this probably tells you that we're going to get the Carlsbad pawn structure. You can see these two pawn chains are going to arise, and okay, black recaptures with a pawn, and white plays bishop to g5, and you're going to see in just a second why he played this. Okay, he played h6, kicking that bishop away, and he took the knight. And this is a pretty common thing in the Carlsbad pawn structure, because your bishop is not that great. You can see your pawns are going to be on these dark squares, and you also want to exchange it for a knight, because when the bishop moves from this square, it no longer attacks this b4 square, and you can easier play this minority attack, as you're going to see. So okay, now black recaptured the bishop, and white played a normal developing move, knight to c3. And you can see that this d5 pawn is probably going to get under some attack, so that's why black decided to move away the knight and play the move c6 to defend everything, which transposes into our structure here. So white played rook to c1. This is really the best square for the rook in this structure and in this position, because this file is half open, as you can see, and it's probably going to open after moves like b4 or b5, or if it's not going to open, then this pawn on c6 is going to be under pressure under the minority attack, so this rook is really the best place on this c1 square. Okay, so black here played c6 and white played b4. You can see he took the action immediately. He went for this minority attack here, and he has the support of his knight here. And you can see the importance of trading the dark squared bishop for a knight, because this bishop no longer attacks this b4 square. So black here played a6 in this game, stopping him from playing b5, because I mean, if white played b5, then he would just take the pawn, and this is just a free pawn. So that's why white played a4, supporting this b5 square, and also his plan of the minority attack. So black played his knight to f5, a pretty good square, and white played b5. You can see this minority attack is really powerful here, and I mean, now black has some options. He can take once and then have this open file. But as you can see, white is going to just recapture this pawn here on the next move, and this is going to be a backwards pawn again, which is hardly going to advance because of this pawn here, and it's going to get under some pressure. So black decided not to do this, and in this game he actually played just rook to e8, because this plan with f5 and f4 is obviously not going to work in this game, because there are two pieces in front of this pawn, and also this pawn on g3 is protecting this even more. So that's why he brought his rook to a more active file here. So white just took the pawn on c6, and you can see the idea of the minority attack here, a backwards pawn and a rook here that is going to pressure it, and Also this square here for a rook or for a knight, pretty good outpost here. And white just wants to regroup his forces here and prepare to attack this pawn. And yeah, this is just a good position for white here. Okay, so he played e3 finally, and black played h5. He wanted to get this attack in. Like we said, a typical plan for black is to attack the white's king. But white just played his knight to e2. And the idea here was basically very good. He wanted to play his knight to f4, to d3, and from d3 jump to this outpost here or even there, but not in this game. So this was really the correct plan here for white. And at the same time, white is attacking this c6 pawn, so black has to defend it. He did it with bringing his queen to this d6 square, and white just followed his plan, and also he attacked this pawn. And black here just pushed the pawn because it was attacked, and now white played g4, stopping any attacks here for black. And this is a really awesome move. And black played g5. This is a really crazy position on the king side now, but we're not going to calculate all the lines, so white basically just played his knight to d3, and now black's knight is still attacked. He has to move it, and he did. And now you can see h3 defending this pawn because it was attacked. Black played his knight to g6, and white played his queen to c2, adding more pressure on this backwards pawn. That's what you have to do, and that's why you played this minority attack. So black defended it, and I just want to mention that a lot of times it's a great idea if you have a bishop on, let's say, d3, to bring it to this f5 square and exchange it for this bishop, because this bishop is, I mean, it's passive, but it's a good defender of this c6 pawn, and you want to get rid of it typically, and this is a cool idea, but here obviously it's not possible because you have a bishop on g2. Okay, so white played the knight to c5, blockading this backwards pawn, getting a knight to a very good square, as you can see, and just preparing to move away with the knight when he's ready. So black played his rook to c8 here, protecting this pawn, and white played his rook to an open file. This was a great idea here in this game. You always want to control open files, so this was a great idea here. And black just played his bishop to e8 because he didn't want white to capture this bishop, this defender of this square, because then white would, I don't know, play his rook here on c1, add more pressure here, and have an advantage. So that's why he played bishop to e8. Now white played a5, a very good move, creating this pretty good square for the rook to come here and attack all the pawns, also double the rooks as you're going to see, and just come to a winning position. So black played his rook to d7, and we can see rook to b6. And okay, now he had to defend this pawn, and you can see this these two rooks are really passively defending this pawn, and white's position is very active. You can see this knight here, the rook is active, the other rook is going to come here like we see here, and now he has full control over this file, and this is basically a winning position for white here. And okay, now white plays bishop to f1, absolutely perfect move, attacking this pawn even more because this bishop wasn't that useful here on this diagonal anymore. And black plays knight to c8, attacking the rook, and white just took the pawn because, I mean, black didn't have a way of defending this pawn, so that's why white just took it. And we see some trades, and this is just a winning position now for white. This a pass pawn, you can see black has a bishop pair, which is usually better than two knights, but this position is really, you can see these two bishops are really passive here, and these two knights are amazing. You can see this knight on this outpost is just dominating the whole board, and this is just perfect for white. So white here played a6 because as you know, passed pawns should be pushed, and it was also attacked, of course, by the rook. So black played his bishop to e7, probably wanting to exchange it for the knight because it's such a great knight. And we can see the occupation of the 7th rank by white, absolutely correct here. And we can see queen to d8. Alright, it's really hard here to play with the black pieces, and I mean black basically played queen to d8 to defend the bishop, and black is really stuck here. So we can see here a7. This pawn is becoming really dangerous here. And alright, bishop to f8. And now we can see the improvement of the white's queen. And he played it on this absolutely perfect square f5. From here it's attacking the pawn and it's really active. It's causing problems to black's territory. It's also threatening moves like knight to f6 because okay, for example, if black plays something stupid, you can play this and he can't take because of a checkmate here. And this is really a good move, queen to f5. But anyway, black played his bishop back here, defending the pawn. And you can see black can't do anything here. He's just waiting white to destroy him. So white played his knight to g5. He took it anyway because of a tactic, as you're going to see here. Knight to e6, like we said. And again, he can't take the pawn, of course, because of mate here. And that's why black played his queen to f6, but this is losing anyway. White just exchanged the queens and play his knight to c7. Attacking the rook, attacking the bishop is just over. I mean, if black plays something like this, then you can just take this bishop and then you're going to promote to a queen and just win the game. So that's why black took the pawn because he had no other chance, but resigned on the next move because this is just a losing position. White has a rook versus a bishop, so this is just a hopeless position for black. Alright, so in this example we looked at the idea of the minority attack, and the player with the white pieces used it correctly and just crushed black. So when you have this structure with white, always think about the minority attack, because I can tell you from my games also, I've won a lot of games with the minority attack, and it's just a perfect element to use in these positions. So try to use it in your own games and you're probably going to see good results with it. So I hope you guys learned something new from this video and that you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video.